My name is Alara Wynn, 32 years old. I've never felt rage creep up so fast in my life. One second, I was lifting my glass for a New Year's toast. The next, my fingers were wrapped so tight around the stem, I honestly thought it might snap in my hand. Mom was standing out of the head of the table, glowing like she was about to announce a surprise vacation or a baby. She loved that spot, the center of attention, everyone's eyes on her. The living room TV was on mute in the background. Some countdown replaying on a loop, and the kids were on the rug with plastic dinosaurs arguing about which one could fly. Dad sat back in his chair, lazy smirk already forming, like whatever was coming next was a joke he'd heard before. Lauren was on Mom's right. Shoulders slumped just enough to look exhausted, but not enough to seem like she'd tried to fix it. Her boys were hers, and somehow everyone else's problem, too. Kelly sat near the end of the table, half hidden behind a candle, hands wrapped around her glass like she was trying to disappear into it. Mom tapped her fork gently against her champagne flute. Ahem, she said, all theatrical, like she'd practiced this in the mirror. The conversations faded. Everyone looked her way. And then she just said it. Your sister's overwhelmed, she declared, eyes locked on me. You'll be paying her rent from now on. Simple as that. Like she was assigning me a chore, like it was already decided, like we were dividing slices of pie, and I'd just been handed the biggest piece. I froze for a second. I actually thought I'd misheard her. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to laugh, to say, kidding. No one did. Lauren didn't flinch, didn't protest, didn't say, Mom, that's not fair. Or, we talked about this. She just stared at her plate. Kelly dropped her gaze to the tablecloth, shoulders tightening. The kids kept playing like nothing in their world had just shifted at all. Then Dad leaned forward, eyes on me, voice flat and serious. If you say no, he said, don't come back. That was the moment I realized this wasn't impulsive. They'd planned this probably days ago, maybe longer. They waited until New Year's, the one night I was expected to be there, expected to smile, expected to swallow anything they handed me, because you don't start a new year with drama. They thought I wouldn't walk out in front of everyone. They thought I wouldn't cause a scene. They thought I would fold the way I always had. Instead, something inside me went very, very still. I lifted my glass. My voice didn't even shake. Then, goodbye, I said calmly, looking right at Mom and Dad. And, good luck paying your problems. I set the glass down without taking a sip. And I walked out. I left my coat on the hook. I left my scarf draped over the back of a chair. I left their expectations sitting at that table with the half-eaten roast and the glittery Happy New Year banner. The air outside was freezing, sharp enough to sting my face, but I didn't feel it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anything except clarity. Because here's what no one at that table knew, or at least what they pretended not to know. I'd been sending Lauren $1,000 a month since April. At first, it was my idea. She was reeling after her husband left, trying to keep things stable for the boys. That's how she phrased it, stable, like stability could exist with no income and no plan. I told her I'd help with rent for a few months. A few months turned into 9. And it wasn't just the rent. When the school lunches suddenly weren't covered, I got a text from Mom. Can you just help this once? She's under so much stress. When a utility bill went overdue because Lauren got confused with dates, I got another call. When Mom said she couldn't afford groceries, I linked my payment info to one of her carts. Funny how the receipt had more snack trays and wine than basics. When Dad's truck broke down 2 winters ago, $700 wired to his account before he even finished the story. When Lauren took the youngest to urgent care for a fever and panicked about the deductible, I paid that, too. It was never can you, it was always you will, right? Somewhere along the way, my salary became less mine and more the family's invisible budget line. They treated my money like it was a shared resource, like it belonged to all of us equally, except when it was time to ask permission. The morning after I walked out, I made coffee in my own quiet kitchen, watched the steam rise, and opened my banking app. I led the automatic transfer to Lauren. Months of temporary help gone with a few taps. I didn't tell her. I wanted her to feel it. The first text came before noon. Hey, I think something went wrong with the rent. Nothing hit my account. I put my phone down, finished my coffee. 2 hours later, still nothing in my account.
Can you check on your end?
The call started after that. 125. Straight to voicemail. The last message she left was 6 minutes long. 6 minutes of crying, sighing, and somehow making it all my fault. And you know how stressed I am. You're making this worse. I can't believe you're doing this to me right now. To the boys. The boys. Always the boys. By afternoon, Mom called. Not to ask if I was okay. Not to ask why I'd left without a coat. Not to apologize for ambushing me in front of everyone. She called to scold me. You embarrassed us, she said, voice sharp, brittle. In front of your nephews, in front of your father. You hurt Lauren more than you realize. I held the phone away for a second, looked at the wall, then brought it back. I'm not paying another cent, I said calmly. There was a heartbeat of silence. Then she hung up. No goodbye. By the end of the week, my phone had turned into a tiny war zone of notifications. Missed calls, ignored texts, little red numbers screaming for attention. Kelly sent just one message. You okay? I stared at it for a long time before replying. I'm fine. Better, actually. She didn't respond, but she didn't add to the pile either. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of all the things they'd never said. Full of all the times they'd decided what my role was without asking. Online, things weren't quiet. Lauren started posting vague quotes about betrayal, screenshots of song lyrics about fake people, long captions about what it means to raise kids with no support. Strangers commented that she was strong, that she was doing her best. No one knew she'd had almost a year of steady help from me. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. I just scrolled, took a screenshot, and closed the app. What I didn't tell anyone, not Lauren, not Mom, not even Kelly yet, was that I hadn't stopped with the rent. If they were going to treat me like the family bank, then the bank was closing. I canceled the monthly $200 I'd been sending Dad for roof repairs. The same leak that somehow never got fixed but always needed money. I stopped the extra $300 Mom said she needed for medical stuff that somehow lined up with her weekend getaways. I called the boys' school and told them I would no longer be covering any fees under my name. If something came due, they'd have to call the actual parents. All of it gone. I wasn't watching them fall apart for fun. I wasn't waiting with popcorn, rooting for the crash. I just knew something undeniable. People who feed off others for too long forget how to feed themselves. A few days later, Mom sent me an email. Not a text, an email. It had a greeting line, my full name, a closing signature. She wrote about how they'd supported me through school, through breakups, through my first job. She wrote about Lauren's trauma, how I couldn't possibly understand her pain. She wrote, when family struggles, we lift each other. We don't abandon them at the bottom. And then the line that made my jaw clench, so hard it hurt. This isn't about money. It's about being a decent human being. I stared at those words and thought about every quiet transfer I'd made that no one had thanked me for. About the truck repairs, the groceries, the deductibles, the rent. When I said yes, I was a good daughter. The second I said no, I wasn't a decent human being. That was when I called Kelly. She picked up on the second ring, sounding hesitant. I just have one question, I said. Is Lauren even looking for a job? There was a pause long enough for me to hear ice clink in her glass. No, she said finally. She's not. That was all I needed. I told her I'd cut everyone off. No more rent. No more quiet deposits. No more random Amazon orders or Target pickup codes when Lauren ran out of diapers. Kelly was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear her deciding whether she was supposed to defend them. Honestly, she said softly, I think you're doing the right thing. It hit me how rare that was. Someone in my family saying I was right without following it with a guilt trip. I didn't tell her I'd already gone deeper than anyone knew, that I'd already shut every side door and secret pipeline. I just let the silence hang between us because that silence was starting to say more than any of us ever had. And this was only the start. The unraveling had already begun. They just hadn't realized yet that this time I wasn't going to catch them. After the first week of silence, something strange happened. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no guilt trips disguised as checking in. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind you get before a storm cracks the sky open. A vacuum, a pause where everyone holds their breath, waiting to see who moves first. I didn't move. I'd spent my whole life making the first move, patching the first hole, smoothing over the first conflict. Not this time. I let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it. Let them feel the absence of the person they'd treated like the family's invisible financial backbone. That's when they shifted their target. Not toward Dad. God forbid he take responsibility. Not toward Mom. She was too good at positioning herself as the emotional victim. Not toward Lauren. She already saw herself as struggling. They turned their attention to Kelly. Poor, quiet Kelly. Always agreeable, always apologizing, always trying to keep the peace between people who never gave her peace in return. She called me one night, whispering through the phone. Era, Mom called 3 times today. What did she want? I asked, though I already knew. She said, someone in this family needs to step up now that you've decided to disappear. Her voice cracked. She said I should start helping Lauren with rent. I sighed. And Dad, he told me I have a responsibility. She muttered, that if I don't help, I'm just as heartless as you. The word stung, but not because of the insult, because of how easily I could hear him saying it. Kelly, I said, you don't owe them anything. There was a long pause, then a quiet, exhausted confession. I know. I'm just tired. I leaned back against my headboard, feeling something unfamiliar. Protectiveness. Real protectiveness. The kind you feel when someone you care about is being targeted by the very people you warn them about. They're desperate, I said softly. And desperate people grab at whoever's closest. That doesn't mean you have to let them. Another pause, then a breath, a shift. 2 days later, Kelly sent me a text. I put in a few job applications today. I stared at the message. Kelly hadn't worked in 3 years. Not since her youngest was born. Everyone simply assumed she'd never go back to work, and she usually went along with whatever the family decided. But now, she was making a choice, a real one, a quiet one, but hers. 3 days later, I got hired part-time. Nothing big, but it's something. I smiled at my phone for the first time in days. This was how change started. Not with screaming matches, not with ultimatums shouted across a holiday table, but with tiny steps taken in private. While Kelly was climbing, Lauren was free-falling. Her social media turned into a tragedy scrapbook. Some people betray you. The second life gets hard. Single mothers carry the world. You never really know someone. And the comments, God. People she barely talked to were calling her brave, calling her strong. Not one of them knew she'd had nearly a year of financial support for me. Not one of them knew she was still refusing to look for a job. Then came the thing that made my jaw clench, so tight that I thought it would crack. A GoFundMe created by my mother. Title, Helping a Young Mother Stay on Her Feet. Goal, $5,000. Photo, Lauren smiling weakly holding her boys.
Story.
After an unexpected betrayal by someone she trusted, Lauren and her 2 children are at risk of losing their home. They didn't just rewrite the story. They erased me from it. Replaced facts with fiction. Turned their choices into my sins. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I didn't even screenshot it. I just whispered to myself, of course. The fundraiser didn't gain much traction. Small donations trickled in. $20, $10, $5. People were supportive, but not enough to actually fix anything. And soon, people started asking quiet questions. Why is Lauren in this situation? Why didn't the family help? Why does this story feel incomplete? That's when the cracks appeared at home. Dad's Facebook started featuring long, winded posts about budgeting and personal responsibility. Mom canceled her annual Arizona trip and made a big public statement about wanting to stay close to home this year. Dad complained loudly about rising expenses. Kelly filled in the blanks. They're stressed, she said during one of our late-night calls. Like, really stressed. How's Lauren? I asked. She tried to drop the boys off at Mom and Dad's. Didn't even knock. Just texted at the door and drove off. Jesus. Yeah, Mom told her she's not a babysitter. Dad yelled. Lauren yelled. Neighbors heard. Kelly picked the boys up just to stop the screaming. I closed my eyes. Imagining years of unspoken resentments detonating was almost too easy. The next day, Kelly sent another text. They're all losing it, and for once, I'm not in the middle. The second text came 5 minutes later. I worked a double today. I'm tired, but proud. And just like that, the pattern reversed. The one who always spiraled downward, Lauren, was falling. The one who always softened the blow, Kelly, was rising. The ones who always controlled the chaos, Mom and Dad, were unraveling. My silence had done something I never expected. It forced everyone to face themselves. But the fall wasn't over, not even close. Because 3 days later, Lauren posted a picture of an eviction notice taped to her door. No caption, just bold letters under it. Some people just don't care. People commented with broken hearts and prayer emojis. Her friends reposted it on their stories. I just stared at it, not shocked, not guilty, not even angry. It wasn't the end. It wasn't a consequence. It was the beginning of consequences. The first undeniable proof that the ground beneath them was giving way. And they still didn't see how much further they were going to fall. Lauren's eviction wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming on the sidewalk. No sheriff knocking on the door. No neighbors gathering to stare. It was quiet. Embarrassingly quiet. Kelly told me she got the call late in the evening. Lauren just said they're kicking us out. Like she was announcing the weather. By the time Kelly drove over, the boys were sitting on the curb with backpacks, and Lauren was surrounded by half-filled trash bags, mascara smudged, muttering about how some people don't care about family. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Within an hour, they were at my parents' house, dragging in suitcases, a broken laundry basket, and the weight of every decision Lauren pretended she didn't make. Mom and Dad hadn't prepared a room. They hadn't even been warned. Kelly said the house felt wrong the moment they walked in. Tense, tight, like the air had thickened. The boys ended up on a twin mattress in Mom's old craft room. The one with the dusty sewing machine and the bins of fabric she swore she was going to use someday. Chaos bloomed immediately. By the second day, Kelly texted me. They're losing it. Everything is a fight. Mom couldn't handle the energy of 2 toddlers. Dad kept shouting that Lauren needed to get a damn job. Lauren kept responding that she was too emotionally drained to think straight. It was the same performance as always, just with the volume turned up. But then something happened none of us expected. Not me, not Kelly, not even Lauren. He came back. Lauren's ex-husband. The man who vanished almost a year ago. The one everyone assumed had run off to another state, started a new life, forgotten he even had kids. He showed up with paperwork, a custody petition, filed official. Kelly's voice shook when she called me. He wants full custody, she whispered. Is he serious? He came with a folder, Era. A whole folder, job records, photos of his new apartment, proof he's been sober for 8 months. He even has letters from people who've seen him with the boys. A cold tension spread through my chest, not because I wanted him to lose. The truth was, I didn't know him well enough to want anything. But because for the first time in this entire mess, the consequences weren't financial. They were real, human, could change lives. Real. Mom was sobbing. Dad locked himself in the garage. Lauren was hysterical. But none of them called me. Not until hours later. 6 missed calls from Lauren. 5 from Mom. 3 from Dad. Then 1 voicemail from Lauren. Her voice shaky, wet, terrified. Alara, please. I know things got bad. I know we messed up, but please, I need my sister right now. Please. I listened to the entire message twice. Not because I felt guilty, but because I didn't recognize her voice. Lauren didn't beg. She demanded, complained, accused, blamed. This was different. But I wasn't going to rush in and save her just because she'd finally hit a wall. Mom's message came next. Not the usual guilt. Not the usual martyr act. Just 6 words. We really screwed up. All of us. That sank in deeper than the eviction notice or the custody petition because for the first time in my life, my mother wasn't pretending. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to twist the narrative. She was simply scared. And somehow that scared me, too. Because if she finally saw the truth, then things had gotten worse than even I realized. While the house imploded, while Lauren unraveled, while Mom cried and Dad hid, Kelly kept growing. Softly, quietly, relentlessly, she picked up extra shifts, found a childcare assistance program, opened a checking account only she controlled, started asking me about resume formats and online programs. When she texted me, it wasn't about drama. It was about progress. I applied for an online certification. I think I want to go back to school part-time. I paid all my bills this month without help. Every message felt like a small sunrise. Proof that at least one person in our family understood what accountability actually looked like. Meanwhile, the others were sinking. Dad began selling old tools, the ones he'd spent years saying he'd pass down someday. Turns out his retirement fund was a fantasy, not a plan. He lived on the assumption that I'd always be there to fill the cracks. Mom had stopped posting pictures entirely. No brunch latte photos, no inspirational quotes, just silence. And Lauren, God, Lauren, she was spinning like a broken weather vane. One day she was rage posting, the next she was begging Kelly for childcare. Then she tried to leave the boys with Mom and Dad permanently until the custody hearing is over. It was a collapse in slow motion but also fast. Everything in free fall at once. Kelly told me something that stuck with me. "They're falling apart," she said quietly. "But I think you were the only thing holding them together for years. They just never realized it." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to because deep down I already knew. I'd spent years being the glue. And when I stopped sticking myself between their cracks, they finally split open. But here's the thing about cracks. Sometimes light gets in. And I saw that light in Kelly first in her texts, her new job, her tired but proud voice on the phone. She was the only one rising, the only one choosing change, the only one who wasn't blaming anyone else. And with every quiet step she took out of the wreckage, something inside me softened. Not for Lauren, not for my parents, but for her. She had done what none of them had. She grew.
She tried.
She took responsibility. That's why one evening, hours after Kelly told me she was registering for her first online class, I found myself doing something that felt strange, almost unreal. I typed out a message and sent it to the family group chat. "Dinner at my place, Sunday at 6 o'clock. You're all invited." Kelly replied in minutes. "I'll bring drinks." Dad responded 3 hours later. "Thanks for the invite." Mom said nothing. Lauren said nothing. 2 days passed. Then Lauren finally wrote, "I'll be there. I'll bring dessert. Thank you for trying." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one chasing a family. They were walking toward me. And this time it would be on my terms. I spent all of Sunday cooking. Not because I wanted the evening to be perfect. Perfection had died in our family years ago. But because I needed the house to feel like mine, completely mine, I made rosemary chicken thighs, mashed potatoes from scratch, lemon, garlic, green beans. I warmed bread in the oven and pulled out the wine glasses they'd given me for Christmas years back. I even lit candles. Nothing dramatic, just enough to soften the room. The table looked simple, warm, intentional, a mirror image of what I'd become since I stopped carrying everyone else's weight. At 5:38 p.m., Kelly arrived. She looked different, not polished, not glowing, just grounded, strong in a quiet way. The kind of strength that grows from exhaustion and choosing to change anyway. She handed me a bottle of wine and a 6-pack of sparkling soda. "I didn't know what everyone drinks anymore," she said, shrugging. "I don't either," I admitted. We laughed together, an easy, natural sound I hadn't shared with any family member in months. We started plating food. She asked if I was nervous. I told her no, and for once I meant it. At 5:50, Mom and Dad pulled up. Dad carried a bottle of wine. Mom clutched a plastic container of store-bought salad, looking guilty around the eyes, but trying to hide it under small smiles. No hugs, no cold shoulder, just awkward civility. Honestly, an improvement. Then Lauren walked in. Her hair was in a messy bun. No makeup, hoodie slightly wrinkled. The boys clung to her side.
Quiet.
Too quiet for kids their age. She held a store-bought pie in one hand and a bag of extra clothes in the other. Didn't want to assume we'd be staying long, she muttered.
Her voice was thin.
I just nodded and pointed her toward the living room. Dinner began slow, soft, safe, like we were all afraid to set off landmines. Kelly talked about her new job. A simple, tired pride in her voice. Dad nodded and said he'd been cleaning out the garage lately. A dry attempt to sound busy, productive, stable. Mom said she and Dad were thinking about downsizing the house. Lauren said nothing at first, just pushed potatoes around her plate with her fork. Not one person mentioned the GoFundMe. Not one person mentioned January. Not one person said the word eviction. The silence was thick, heavy, like everyone was waiting for someone else to break it.
So I did.
Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork and looked directly at Kelly. I'm proud of you. Everything stopped. Kelly's eyes widened, almost confused, like she thought I was talking to someone else. Then her face shifted. First shock, then disbelief, then something soft and warm that made my throat tighten. You didn't wait for someone to fix everything, I said. You didn't expect anyone to rescue you. You just moved. You rebuilt. That matters. Kelly swallowed. Her eyes glimmered. She didn't say much, just nodded almost shyly. But her whole posture changed, like a weight she'd carried her whole life suddenly lifted. Mom nodded too quickly. She's really grown, she offered. We've noticed. It sounded rehearsed, too polished, but at least she was trying. Lauren finally looked up, her lips pressed together, eyes glossy. Then she spoke. I'm sorry. The room stilled. Not because any of us expected her to apologize, but because we didn't expect her to mean it. I'm sorry, she said again, voice trembling, for that night, for everything after. I didn't realize how far I'd sunk until I had nothing left to throw at anyone. She let out a small, humorless laugh. I kept blaming everyone else for my life falling apart. But you were right, all of you. I just didn't want to see it. She turned toward Kelly. And you did what I was supposed to do. You stepped up. Kelly didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't rub it in. It's never too late, she said softly. That right there was the first real forgiveness in our family. Not the dramatic kind, not the movie scene kind, just quiet truth. I took a breath, held it, then released the rule. The one thing this family had never heard before. No one is carrying anyone anymore. Mom blinked. Dad straightened. Lauren nodded immediately, as if she'd been waiting for that boundary her whole life. Everyone murmured agreement. No pushback, no defensiveness, no guilt traps. Dad lifted his glass. To starting over, he said it was the most subdued toast he'd ever made. Maybe the most honest. We finished dinner. The boys giggled in the other room. Kelly helped pack leftovers. Lauren tied her youngest shoes, without snapping or sighing. Mom asked if I wanted to come over next weekend for coffee. I'll think about it, I said. And I meant that, too. Because for the first time in years, the idea of being around them didn't make me feel cornered. They saw the edge, the fall, the silence I gave them, and now they were walking differently, cautiously, carefully, honestly. I didn't trust them completely. That takes time. Boundaries don't erase history. They reshape it. But I saw something at that table I hadn't seen since we were kids. Willingness to try, to change, to face themselves. That's enough for now. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because the evening kept replaying in my mind. The way Kelly sat taller when I praised her. The way Lauren didn't make a single excuse. The way Dad actually said thank you on his way out. The way Mom hugged me when she left. A real hug, not performative. It all felt new, uneasy, promising. The next morning my phone buzzed. A photo from Lauren. She was wearing a plain black cafe uniform, hair pulled back, name tag pinned crookedly to her chest, holding a paper cup with a shy, exhausted smile. Started today, just mornings for now. Kids are with Mom. Thanks again for last week. I won't mess it up. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because I doubted her, but because for the first time, she wasn't asking me for anything. Not money, not pity, not rescue, just space to grow. I typed back, Keep going. You've got work to do. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Kelly called that night. She asked me about budgeting, she said, and child care assistance. She wants to figure out how to pay her own rent someday. Not now, but eventually. There was a soft pride in her voice I'd never heard before. She's scared, Kelly added, but in the right way. We talked for almost an hour about work, the boys, meal prep, schedules. For once, our conversations weren't stitched together by crisis and drama. Just two sisters talking like adults with real lives. Later that week, Mom invited me over for coffee. I hesitated, but I went. The house felt smaller, quieter, like the air had settled. She made muffins. I didn't eat one, but I thanked her anyway. She asked about my job, my week, and my life. Not once did she mention money. Not once did she hint at needing anything. When I stood to leave, she hugged me. A real hug. No theatrics, no agenda. Then Dad showed up at Kelly's place 2 days later. Fixed a leak under her sink. Didn't lecture her. Didn't brag. Just did it. Told the boys to stop climbing the couch on his way out. Small things but real things, different things. Then came dinner number 2. This time at Kelly's. Everyone brought something. I brought roasted vegetables. Lauren brought homemade cookies. Slightly overbaked, but she tried. Mom made a salad. Dad helped set the table. No tension, no accusations, just the sound of kids laughing in the backyard. Halfway through the meal, Kelly leaned over and whispered, "Do you realize no one's asked you for anything tonight?" I looked around. She was right. We sat on her porch afterward, just the two of us, wine glasses in hand.
It's weird, she said.
I think we're finally becoming the family we always said we were. Not perfect, not tight-knit, but real. I nodded because someone finally said no. She smiled, soft, knowing. In the end, forgiveness didn't arrive as a grand gesture. It wasn't shouted or demanded. It slipped in through cracks left behind by silence and consequence. I don't trust them completely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I trust that they learned something. That they saw what life looked like when I stopped rescuing them. And they chose, however slowly, to rescue themselves. For the first time in years, I don't feel like the one holding everything together. We're each holding our own pieces now.